Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Taking Control of Your Financial Wellness. I am Crystal Brando, the Assistant Director of SAMHSA's Program to Achieve Wellness, and we're very happy to have all of you on the line with us today. Before we get started with the webinar, a quick disclaimer that the views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So again, today's webinar is called Taking Control of Your Financial Wellness, and we're very pleased to have three experts on the line with us sharing some information on this topic and the connections between financial wellness and physical health. So we're joined by Dr. Peggy Swarbrick, who is a consultant, senior consultant for the Program to Achieve Wellness. She also works at Collaborative Support Programs of New Jersey and Rutgers University Behavioral Health Care, as well as on many wellness initiatives. We're also joined by Pat Nemec, who's an independent trainer and consultant in the area of psychiatric rehabilitation and recovery. She also works with Peggy Swarbrick at Collaborative Support Programs of New Jersey on a variety of health and wellness projects. And finally, we're joined by Oscar Jimenez-Solomon, who is a mental health researcher and an advocate. He works as a research scientist at the New York State Psychiatric Institute, Columbia University Medical Center, where he leads a research project to develop a peer-supported economic empowerment intervention for people in recovery. So we have a great team here talking about this concept of financial wellness. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand this off to Dr. Swarbrick to get the conversation started.
Great. Thanks, Crystal. Thanks, everybody. Welcome today to Taking Control of Financial Wellness. This is a really exciting, important webinar that I think that we're very pleased to be able to provide this for you. And the learning objectives that we have for today is really, we're hoping by the end of the time today, the end of the hour, you'll be able to define financial wellness, particularly for people with serious and mental illness, to really get a good handle on the definition of financial wellness and recognize the connection between poverty and mental disorders, how the effect of poverty impacts people and really how we can help people, and start to see the links and connections between financial and physical wellness, how they affect each other in ways and how we can start to help, importantly, help people think about and start to improve these areas. And finally, we're going to be able to provide some resources to be able to help support other people's financial wellness, people you support. So we've really got a full agenda here today and a lot of objectives to accomplish, and I think we've got a great team to talk about these things. The next slide is to provide you an overview and give you a little bit of a definition as we've mapped it out. In terms of financial wellness, this is the ability to have enough money or have money to meet practical needs, have a sense of control over, and knowledge of financial personal finances. So this is an area that I have been doing quite a bit of work for many, many years, just personally, like all of us, as we'll see in a minute. We all personally have a connection to this. But at my work at Collaborative Support Programs in New Jersey, we've done a lot of work on this area and really seen some really important ways of you can help people, even if they are in poverty, even if people have limited incomes, we can help people in this area. So that's the real hopeful news. So I've done some work at Collaborative Support Programs. I've also worked very closely with my colleague Oscar at Columbia University, who will talk more about some of the great work. And again, there is some work being done at Yale. So this is just not a fleeting idea. This is an area that's been really recognized very important of financial wellness, and particularly the connections to physical wellness. When we feel financially stressed, like things like getting more debt, we start to have more emotional stress that may come in the form of anxiety or depression. Sometimes, often can impact people's physical health status. And then what can happen for people is it starts to affect those other life areas, say work or school or the other kind of areas that people identify as valued roles. We may even start to question our own meaning and purpose in life, the whole spiritual dimension. When we're not working the occupational dimension, we sometimes lose those opportunities to interact with other people, having a connection to that social connection. And again, it can affect our physical dimension, again, we may not be able to get the foods that are really healthy for us or be able to do some of the things physically that can help us to stay well or get that health care we might need. It may also impact the living situation. So as we look at the wheel of wellness, we can see the financial dimension touches those areas, and it has that effect on people in a way. And it can have that negative and or a positive, as we're going to talk about it. The next slide. We see the connection to health. It affects our physical health in a big way. As I mentioned, we can feel stress, we may feel anxiety, there may be tension. That can start to affect people physiologically in the form of blood pressure, sleep disturbance, and probably a whole host of other physical health areas. So helping people, you know, we may not be helping people become per se rich or gain more assets right in the short term, but maybe in the long term, but helping people to take that charge of their financial wellness and have that control, even if the budget is small, we've seen really empowers people and can have a positive impact on their well-being. So we're going to have a really nice, good conversation with our colleagues here to go more deep into this. But before we start, because this is really something that affects people we serve, but it also affects us, whether we are a person in recovery on the phone or someone who's a peer provider or a provider, whatever role, this concept of financial wellness affects us all. So we have polling questions. The first one's going to be, we want you to take a few minutes to think about, for me, financial wellness is either very important, somewhat important, or not important. So that's the first question. And the same polling question is going to ask you, I would benefit from education and skills to improve my financial wellness. And the answers are yes, I'm sure, and no. So we're going to take a few minutes, and Pat's going to help let us look at the results and really take us into the presentation today to really be able to accomplish our objectives. So just take a minute and answer the questions.
We are closing the poll right now.
Whether this is an area where people feel confident, one of the things that I've heard occasionally from service providers is that if they don't feel particularly confident about their own financial wellness or financial understanding of financial matters, they may not feel confident enough to help other people. So we do have some results in here. Not many people answered the first question. Of the people who answered, most people checked number 3, which was important. So that's the first question. Number 3, important. Actually, most people picked very important. So that was a pretty high percentage. And then next after that was important. So it looks like well over half the people picked either important or very important on this item, which is not surprising. On the second polling question, well over half the people picked yes. I would benefit from education couple of people, several people picked unsure, and only one person, 3 people picked no as their answer out of all the people, which is almost 200 people on the call. So, as I was saying, I think one of the reasons this doesn't really get addressed in depth by service providers is that many service providers themselves feel somewhat unsure about their own knowledge and maybe don't really know how to go about supporting people. So let's talk a little bit about what financial wellness is. Peggy gave you a nice definition, but when we talk about financial wellness, it's important to consider both the objective indicators. These are things you can measure, like how much money you have in the bank, how much money you owe. You can even measure how much people know about financial products and services like savings accounts or checking accounts or credit cards. And then the subjective indicators include things like how satisfied a person is with their current financial situation, how concerned or confident they are about their future financial wellness situation. And it gets at the point that emotional factors play a big part in someone's willingness and ability to manage their money, as well as whether a person feels at all optimistic about the possibility of financial wellness. So addressing the objective indicators through knowledge and skill development is one way to go about it, and some of the resources we'll talk about later. But it's also important to consider and talk with people about their subjective measures and how they feel, what their experiences are, what they've been through, and this is an area where peer support may be most especially useful. There are a lot of things that contribute to somebody's financial situation. Some of these are called social determinants. These are the things in somebody's culture, their environment, their immediate environment, their health situation, the state of the economy that they're in, the kind of social connections that they have. And these factors occur at all levels, the national level, regional area, your particular community that a person lives in, whether they're connected to family or not, where their family's at in terms of financial wellness. And all these things influence a person's ability to feel well financially. And then, as Peggy talked about, financial wellness contributes to your physical health as well as your mental health, how you're feeling emotionally. Poverty is connected to psychiatric conditions. We know that it goes in both directions. Persistent poverty makes it difficult for people to recover. People who have or are at risk of a mental health condition or substance use condition. And also having mental health challenges of some sort or substance use issues can make it more likely that the person is going to be living in poverty. SSI and SSDI, as probably most people on the phone or on the call already know, it's very difficult to live on. SSDI is not available to everyone either. Publicly funded behavioral health programs make use a lot of representative payee systems, which takes a lot of the financial control away from people, and very few programs have plans or ways to really help people get off rep payeeship, which creates all sorts of challenges and limits opportunities for people to develop their financial wellness. To give you an idea of poverty and mental health disorders, an estimated 9.8 million adults in the U.S. have a serious or diagnosed with a serious mental illness, and of those, about 2.5 million were living below the poverty line. So for people who are experiencing mental health condition, many of those people are already living in poverty. And I'm going to switch over to Oscar here, so he's going to go on to the next slide. I think Oscar may be on mute, so he'll be with us in just a sec.
Okay, can you hear? Hello, this is Oscar Jimenez Solomon. I am with the New York State Psychiatric Institute at Columbia Medical Center. First of all, I want to thank Crystal and SAMHSA's Program to Achieve Wellness for the invitation to speak to you about financial wellness, and also applaud SAMHSA's commitment to financial wellness, which has been long-standing, and glad to also see us move forward on this topic. That many of us are, like Peggy was saying, have been working on it for a number of years. Most of what I'll be sharing with you this afternoon is part of work that we've been doing here at the New York State Psychiatric Institute, but also during my time at the New York Association of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services, NIAPRS. Also want to acknowledge that much of the research that we conducted is also been funded by the New York State Office of Mental Health. And the vision or the dream that we've been working with is this idea of having one day an evidence-based economic empowerment intervention that can work for people in recovery and that can be strongly led by peer support specialists, because we believe that there can be a very strong marriage between the principles of peer support and also the needs that people in recovery face to achieve financial wellness. So what I wanted to do in this slide is talk a little bit more about probably one of the things that you're wondering, which is building a little more what both Pat and Peggy have already said, which is what do we mean exactly when we say financial wellness? And so based on this, the research and programmatic experience of the last decade that is really what informs our work here, we've been able to develop both a definition and a map of the key dimensions of financial wellness, and this is what I wanted to share with you on this slide. The first one, basically in sum, we propose that financial wellness is the overall ability, state of well-being, rather, that results from the ability to one, exercise control of one's personal finances, which is really key to self-determination, and we call that financial control, which is one of the circles that you see on the slide. 2, to earn sufficient income to meet one's needs and pursue recovery goals, which is what we call financial stability. 3, the ability to build assets, right, which is really key to achieve security and financial security, such as savings, property, retirement accounts, rainy day funds. 4, the ability to live independently from public benefits that and other programs that limits one's choices. And 5, the ability to exercise what we call these economic rights and fulfill responsibilities as well, such as being a taxpayer, a contributing economic citizen, and et cetera. So these are what we call the 5 dimensions of financial wellness. Again, financial control, financial stability, financial security, financial autonomy, and citizenship. And during the last few years, a number of us have been working on identifying good indicators for each of these. And so far, just to mention a couple of examples, we see, for example, that key indicators of having control over one's personal finances are whether or not someone has a repayee, right, and to what extent a person participates in a day-to-day financial decisions. Indicators of financial stability include whether or not someone can make ends meet and how burdened they feel by debts. Key indicators of financial autonomy is to what extent a person depends on SSI or SSDI as a main source of income, right? We know what difference that could make in someone's life. Someone else that I want to mention too here is that all of these dimensions interact with each other. Like, for example, it'd be hard for someone to be able to save towards a rainy day fund if he or she cannot make ends meet today, right? So moving on, we wanted to also comment on making a little bit more of the case of what we've been hopefully saying so far, which is the connection between financial wellness and wellness in general. And one of the things that we've seen through a research project we've been working on during the last few years with Peggy in collaboration with CSPNJ, the Collaborative Support Programs in New Jersey, and another 2 other organizations in New York State, Baltic Street and the Mental Health Peer Connection. is this a study where we've conducted with about 215 individuals receiving employment services. It's a group, very diverse, working age adults, 18 to 65, ethnically diverse, about 50% African Americans and Hispanics, mostly low educational level, mostly single, which is actually a trait that we find in the population, and with a very small percentage of people who actually work. And in this study, what we found in general is that it's high levels of dependency, low levels of control, high levels of instability, and things like, for example, 2/3 of people we find depend on SSI or SSDI as their main source of income, which is pretty significant. 80% have incomes below the federal poverty line, which in 2016 was around less than $12,000, which means that the large proportion of people receive incomes lower than the federal poverty line. Only about 1/3 of those on SSI or SSDI have a repayee, which means that they depend on someone else to make their decisions, right? About 3/4, about 75%, find it difficult to make their basic needs, which means financial stress and inability to make ends meet, and about half feel like they have too much debt, right? So how is it living like this, right? In high levels of dependency, stress, and financial insecurity. And one of the things that we see here in the study that we're conducting is that the low levels of financial wellness are very much associated with low levels of emotional and social wellness, and concretely that the lower the level of satisfaction that someone actually has about their current financial situation, for example, the lower that they're going to experience emotional wellness, such as, for example, the less hope that they're going to feel about their future, the less satisfied with their lives, and the lower quality of life that they actually experience, and the more negative social experiences, shaming experiences that someone actually feels. Similarly, we also see that financial wellness is very much connected to to the satisfaction in physical wellness, or with physical wellness. What I mean by this is that how satisfied a person feels about his or her overall health is significantly and positively correlated to their ability to make ends meet on others. In other words, what we found in this study is that the less able someone is to meet their needs in a typical month, the more burdened somebody feels by their debts, and the less satisfied they feel about their financial situation, the less satisfied he or she feels about their overall health. We cannot establish a causal relationship, but it's a significant finding and very consistent with what we see in the literature and broader research. And now I'm actually going to pass the control back to Pat, who's going to continue with us.
Okay. Oscar and Peggy have really made a good case that financial wellness is really critical for many reasons, and there are many components to financial wellness. So we're getting into the question of, well, how do you help people feel more well financially? And as I mentioned before, there are the objective and subjective components of sort of measuring or looking at financial wellness. And one of the objective components is whether people have the knowledge and the skill they need to be able to take care of what money they have, to be able to save money, to be able to avoid risky situations where they're going to lose their money. So financial literacy, let me tell you a little bit about what that is first. Financial literacy means being able to find, understand, evaluate, and apply information to improve your financial wellness. So the first thing is, where do you get that information? Peggy and I are currently working on curricula to help develop financial wellness that should be coming out later in the spring with the University of Illinois Chicago folks, Judith Cook and Jessica Jonicus. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to be 6 classes where people are going to learn some of the basics But one of the things that I certainly learned in putting together some of the materials for this curriculum is that there's so much to learn, and it can be hard to find the information that you need to be able to make sense out of your own financial situation. Even for people like me who are quite accomplished at finding information, it can be a bit of a challenge. So once you find it, can you even understand the way it's presented, if it's written or if it's in a little video on YouTube or something? Does it even make sense to you? How do you know that it's legitimate? How do you know that what you're looking at is really something that you can trust? That's the whole question, particularly with the information on the internet. And then if you do find information and you understand it, you decide it's reliable and you're willing to use it, how do you actually apply it to improve your personal financial wellness? And one of the things we found in our curriculum development process is there's a lot of information out there and a lot of curricula, actually training materials, but they're not all presented in a way that people actually learn what to do with the information that they're provided. So financial literacy education includes things like money management skills. What are the things you need to be able to do, like constructing a budget? How do you figure out what your income is? How do you plan ahead for the expenses that are going to be upcoming? You know, it's not unusual for people, even people who are very good at money management. I find myself sometimes being surprised, even though I know, like, my car insurance bill is going to be coming, and it sometimes surprises me when it ends up in the mail, and I realize, oh, this is a big one-to-year payment, and I need to be prepared for that. So having those sorts of skills are important. Understanding banking, credit, and debt. Banking is more complicated. Maybe there are a lot of people on the phone like me who've had the same bank account for a long time, but if you're trying to find a new bank, how do you choose the bank? How do you decide this bank instead of that bank? How do you pick a credit card that's going to give you the best terms? Do you even understand how a credit card works? These are fairly complicated bits of information that people need to be able to manage their money and plan ahead. And then there's the whole issue of staying safe and avoiding scams. How do you know when somebody calls you up about something or you get something in the mail? How do you know that it really is something that you can trust, that information? The next slide is still talking about building financial wellness and has at the top financial wellness goals and plans. So one of the things that I think it's important to consider is that people do need, with their financial wellness, a lot of goals are very long-term goals. In a year, I will have paid off my credit card. In 5 years, I will be at this, I will have saved so much money. But it's also important for people to have very short-term goals, like what are you going to do in the next month? What are you going to do this week? What are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do the day after in order to move yourself closer to that goal? Many goals, not just financial wellness goals, but many life goals. And we're still in the season of New Year's resolutions. Many New Year's resolution type goals fail because people have these very large, very global, very vague goals. So goals need to be very observable, very measurable, and need to include some sort of short-term goals or objectives. It's also really, really important for people to have goals and plans that help them get off rep payee-ship. Any program that acts as a rep payee should also be helping people work towards achieving financial independence from the rep payee and eventually, as Oscar was talking about, financial autonomy being off public benefits. Improving health can also decrease expenses, and decreasing your expenses can also sometimes improve health. And two simple examples are smoking cessation. In case you didn't have a clue about this, smoking is an expensive habit, and people can save a lot of money by quitting smoking. Walking is good it can be fun, it can be a social event if you walk with other people, it's good for your health, and also can help you save money on transportation. So there's a lot of areas where improved health can also help you in the long run, improve your financial situation and vice versa. So I'm going to turn over to Oscar here, and he's going to carry it on from this point for a little while.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, this is very helpful and very very important to hear described as Pat. You know, and you know, we have limited time here, and there are so many strategies that we could talk about to support people in recovery to improve their financial wellness, whether it is to improve any of those dimensions that we've presented, whether it is to improve their level of control, whether it is to improve the level of autonomy from public benefits, the level of stability, right? Reducing the financial stress on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis, right? Or to improve more long-term sense of security, being able to go to bed knowing that I have a little rainy day fund or that I have something to tap into in case something happens in my life. So we're just going to mention a few here, some resources, some strategies that we want to highlight around each of those dimensions. One that I want to emphasize is this idea of helping people to improve their access to financial products and services. One of the things that we've seen in research, and this is not necessarily with people with mental health conditions, but just in general, is that knowing what to do is not enough, right? That I can actually have great level of financial education, but if I'm not connected to affordable and accessible financial services, asset building, income increasing supports, it doesn't matter how much I know how positive my attitudes are. So one of those main areas that we want to comment on is just something very specific, that if there's one thing that we could start with is by helping people getting banked, meaning have access to a checking and a savings account that we know is very much connected to progress moving forward financially. What we see in the study that we conducted is that about half of people in the group that we've worked with do not have access to a checking account, and about 75% don't have access to a savings account, which are actually very, very low levels of access to basic financial services. And, you know, in about a quarter report having used a pawn shop, right, in the last 5 years, and about a third having actually used having used a prepaid debit cards. We're actually known to, you know, have, you know, high fees. But in any case, so that's actually really important. Something else to mention that we want to mention here is that employment is important as a strategy. We don't have the time to focus here on employment as a economic empowerment, but hopefully that's a given. But it's certainly not a requirement to be able to engage people in economic empowerment interventions. Last thing, the next thing that I'll mention is these tools that we developed a few years ago. This is actually something that these tools are available through NIAPRS, the New York Association of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services. You can see the website right there. Links to these resources are going to be sent by email and also in the PDF following up this webinar. What I'll just highlight is that these We Can Save tools include both a workbook for people in recovery that want to improve their financial wellness, and also a guide for providers to promote that. The next tool I'll mention is something developed by SAMHSA. It's actually Creating a Healthier Life Handbook. This actually is a handbook that for people to actually get them some guidance and also develop specific goals around different areas of wellness, including physical wellness and financial wellness. Again, the link, you'll be able to access it through the PDF, and also will be sent by email afterwards. A couple other programs, and I'll move on to the next slide for that we want to comment is a relatively new program that now is available in many states, and over half of states across the country. It's called Achieving a Better Life Experience, ABLE, A-B-L-E. This is a very important resource that we're trying to actually make sure that people across the country learn about or know about, that this may be available. What it is basically a tax-exempt, it's a program that was created the federal government allowed through the ABLE Act for states to create the savings programs so that individuals with significant disabilities could save tax-exempt up to $14,000 a year and $100,000 in a lifetime. Some states actually have higher limits. And this is the key, without affecting eligibility for public benefits like SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, and others. And also so that individuals can actually use these expenses for a wide variety of eligible expenses. The caveat is that at this point, the eligibility age is, one of the criteria for eligibility is that the individual must show that they became disabled by the age of 26. This is part of the advocacy work that is being done. And I want to direct you here to a very important resource, both in terms of information, but also policy advocacy, which is the ABLE National Resource Center, ablenrc.org, which actually is a very up-to-date map, provides a very up-to-date information on each state, what programs are available, where, the basic eligibility criteria, and the basic descriptions. And also information on how to continue the advocacy, which is something that I'd like to encourage everyone. One of those pieces is to increase the age of eligibility so that more people with psychiatric conditions can have access to it. I'm going to move on to a program that it may also be really important for people to achieve basic financial stability, especially for those who are actually at the risk of homelessness. SAMHSA has a program called SOAR, S-O-A-R, in collaboration with Policy Research Associates. And the main purpose of this program is to increase access to SSI and SSDI in a more streamlined fashion, faster, to be able to support people who are at risk of homelessness and help them to actually increase, have access to income and prevent their homelessness. And this is done through training case managers and providing guidance and technical assistance. You can see there on the slide the address where you can get more information about this program. This is also going to be sent to you in the email that will follow up this webinar. Just want to kind of change gears here because much of what we're really talking about are specific, we've been talking about data and research and also some of the services, but I just want to highlight that there's a human story here, right? Each of us has a personal story around money, around financial pressures, stressors, but also around, hopefully, our ability to pursue dreams. Ultimately, that's really what people and human beings care about, is right to have a purpose. And the fact that most of us care about improving our financial wellness, not just to have more money or stability, but because of what it allows us to do. And I wanted to share the story here of Pilot and Joan, who have been generous through the years in sharing their personal story of how they got to own a home and really build their hope of raising a family and aging with dignity. I met Pilot and Joan a number of years ago. They were both people in recovery. This was their dream, to actually one day be able to buy a home so that they could start a family. Each of them had different challenges and depended on Social Security benefits and had a lot of difficulty making ends meet, and also, like many of us, had credit problems as a result of these financial stressors, right? So through a number of stars lining up, right, and a bit of their own self-empowerment, but also some supports that were available in the area where they live, which is in Syracuse, New York. They were really determined to not let their circumstances define them and what they could and they couldn't achieve. So they approached their credit union and received financial counseling to set financial goals, to work on credit repair, work on saving money. And they were told about a home buyers program that could give them a match of 4 to 1 if they saved towards buying a home. And their goal was to save about $2,000, to be matched by another $8,000, to have the beginnings of down payment. when they accomplish this goal, they actually receive help through grants for closing costs. And a couple years later, they were able to save enough money for a down payment and be able to close on the home of their dreams, you know. And after a while, receiving low-interest loans to help them make repairs and improvements, the value of their home increased so much that their equity, meaning how much money the house was worth over what they owed, was over $100,000 in just 4 years, which was to them something that seemed unimaginable 5 or 10 years before. And what's most important, after many years of dreaming and hard work and times of doubt, they were able to adopt a child and start the family that they always wanted, which is ultimately what motivated them to do this work. And with that, you know, I just want to put a plug in for the personal motivations that are so connected to who we are as cultural beings, as men, women, gay, straight, white, black, from rural area or from an urban area or whatever other sources of identity, which is, you know, what we dreams? What are our dreams? What motivates us? What is our purpose? You know, what are the things that give meaning to our lives, you know, and what is it, you know? And I would encourage you, if you're a person in recovery who is interested in this, or a provider who is hoping to support others, to engage people in conversations. This is really a key strategy on what those dreams are, what the motivations are to pursue in wellness, because the road is rough, you know, and in that process, knowing that I'm buying a car is important, but especially because I want to apply to a better job that I really want, or a career of my dreams, you know, that I want to save some money, but it's because I want to start a college fund for my kid, you know, because I want my kid to actually have the stability and security that I didn't have, and so many other examples that we could think of. So with that, I want to pass the control back to Pat, who will actually no, I think we had a change in plans here, right, Pat? I think I'm actually going to stay here. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to share here some examples of financial capabilities, which is actually what here ultimately we hope that we'll be able to support individuals, is to basically not only have the increased knowledge, more supportive attitudes and skills, but also be able to have access to the asset building, financial products, and in many cases work incentives too that can help people make a difference. And some examples include, for example, being able to have be able to track what I spend, you know, being able to have concrete tools and a habit of tracking what I spend, you know, understanding better what I owe, what my debts are, you know, and how, and, you know, what my plan is to repaying them. You know, in general, being able to have a budget and not only develop a budget, but also be able to stick up to a budget, to make adjustments as needed, to do, you know, compared shopping, you know, and be able to wisely consider different options that I have, whether it's buying in bulk or whether it's actually comparing prices across different stores or online. Also, the ability to pay my bills on time, which we know it's not just simply the desire to pay my bills on time or my knowing that I have to pay my bills on time, but also helping individuals to reduce their stressors so that they can actually pay their bills on time, right? And prioritizing the things that really matter in terms of meeting basic needs. And so on that, just more broadly, probably important financial capability, like I mentioned, is the ability to also know what resources are available, to know, for example, what work incentives I actually may have access to, that I receive as SDI or SSI, and I'm eligible for different type of work incentives that can help me increase my income and accumulate money without affecting my benefits, right? We know that this is an important area. But then also other programs that, for example, can help us save and build more security, like individual development accounts or the ABLE, A-B-L-E, the Achieving Life Experience program that we just mentioned, or even just basic banking services that are essential for people as an entry point to be able to access financial resources such as credit, for example, and reducing the likelihood that someone will be in a trap of a payday loan or having to pawn something that they own. So with that, actually, we'll move on to the next polling question, which Pat's going to lead us into, correct?
Yes, thanks, Oscar. I think you brought up a lot of important points, and particularly when you talk about the dreams, what are your dreams? What are the things that you wish for, that you imagine might be optimistically, might be possible in your life? And we have just, we're curious about which of the areas that are listed on the slide are really most important to you right now. And we're saying most important because you only have the option of picking one of the items here. So we have about 1 minute to go through this polling question. So as you're voting, I'll explain some of these options. They're certainly all interrelated in many ways. So, but each one is going to point you in a slightly different direction of where you would go, what sort of critical knowledge and skills are important to actually make this sort of change in your life. So the first one is saving for the future or future expense. And this could be saving for a concrete thing like a car. It could be saving for something like a vacation or an education program that's more of an experience. But the idea that putting money away today is necessary to be able to get what you want later on. The second item, building my money management skills. We've talked about a lot of different skills and knowledge here, including some of the very complicated knowledge that Oscar was just talking about financial services and resources. Paying off my debts, I think, is many people have debts. If you read the information about the sort of current status of people in the U.S., a lot of people are deeply, deeply in debt. And then the last one is improving my credit rating, because there are all sorts of financial resources that you can access if you have a good credit rating that you're not able to get if your credit rating is low. So we should have the results of this poll in just a couple of seconds here, and it would be interesting to see what people pick. After we get the poll results, we're going to have time. We're going to have a little over 10 minutes for questions. I noticed that some people have already submitted questions, so we should have some opportunity for discussion here between now and the time the webinar ends. I'm looking for the results and I don't see them yet, so why don't we go ahead and start taking some of the questions, and then as those results come in, we can talk about them during the discussion time. So I'm going to switch back to Crystal so she can organize the, oh, here we have the results. They just came in. We got most of the people put paying off my debts, which is not surprising given the current number of people in this country who have significant debt. Saving for the future came in at number 2. Building my money management skills came in at number 3. And improving my credit rating was down near the bottom, although it's likely for people who pay off their debts and begin to save, they may find that their credit rating improves. So I'm going to turn it over to Crystal, and we're going to get a sense of what the questions are, and we're all, Peggy, Oscar, and I are all available to add comments to the discussion that follows.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Peggy, Pat, Oscar. That was a wonderful presentation, and thank you for going into such detail on this topic. It's very helpful. We have quite a few questions coming in, and we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So we're going to do our best to go through whatever questions that we can get through in the time remaining. One of the questions that has come up is whether or not these slides will be available, and just to emphasize, yes, we will email all of the attendees the slides from today's webinar. The recording of the webinar will also be available on SAMHSA's YouTube channel for the full presentation with closed captioning. And like Oscar mentioned, in addition to sending you the slides, we'll send you links to some of the resources that have been shared as well. So one of the first questions that we have here relates to the ABLE program, and I'm not sure, Oscar, if you have this information offhand, but a question has to do with just some of the details of that program, just to go into a little bit more depth and breadth as far as eligibility and how to use it and how it's made accessible to people.
Yeah, I mean, given the time, I mean, what I'll just mention maybe briefly a couple things that I did not before, but it just, I mean, I really could not encourage you more to go to the ABLE.NRC.org website that really provides state-by-state description of the specific eligibility criteria for each program, who provides it, and also what benefits it provides. Because there's some differences state by state, and I don't want to overstate something that has some common traits, but there's many differences across states. There's some states that don't have them yet, but something that I wanted to share with you is that you could be in a state that does not have an ABLE program, but you're still eligible to enroll in programs in other states. So that's actually important. The other is that the use, I didn't comment this much, but the use of the funds actually can be for health, housing, work, transportation, or any expenses that could be related to disability. But this is again, I don't want to give advice to anyone, but this can be seen as a pretty broad spectrum. Basically how this works is that I could have, I mean, right now if I'm a Social Security, an SSI recipient, I can only have assets, savings, etc., for up to $2,000, right, which is the asset limit. If I am on SSI and I'm still eligible for SSI, and I open an ABLE account and I'm able to actually have assets for up to $100,000 at least, in some cases $200,000, $300,000 without affecting my SSI eligibility. And that's something that I cannot stress enough. It's a program that can give so many people an opportunity to go back to work, still be able to actually receive some benefits, still remain eligible for them, and build assets, which is ultimately what can make in our lives, is to build some sense of security. But again, I just cannot stress enough, if you're interested in more details, please go to this website. It's kept very much up to date, and it's an excellent group. It's actually run by the National Disability Institute, that's from Washington, D.C., that has been behind this new policy.
Great, thank you for that. And I did send the link to the website through the chat box, so that is on there on the screen just in case people missed it during the slide. Another question, it's not for anyone in particular, but Peggy, Pat, or Oscar, do you have any suggestions on how to really focus on veterans with mental health diagnoses or serious mental illness to help support their financial wellness? So whoever wants to take that.
Yeah, I think this is Peggy. I think any of the strategies we talked about could be helpful, I think. You know, they might have different set of circumstances, so, you know, but I think many of the strategies around just helping people with budgeting and starting to even just have conversations and then working individual with people, I think is a good place to start. Pat, do you have another thought?
No, I was thinking the same thing. I think there are different resources that are available for people who are veterans. So you need to have some expertise around those resources. But for the most part, financial wellness is financial wellness. I think that the big difference is in resources, but the strategies, the knowledge, and the skills that people need and can use are really across the board for anybody.
Great, thank you very much. Another question that we have here says, can you say more about any specific best practices, models, services out there with the mission of intensive financial planning for low-income individuals to help shift them from living in a state of poverty into the middle class. So any specific financial planning programs you're aware of?
Well, there's probably many in your local community, so this is a good opportunity where you can do a scan of where you are out in whatever part of the country. I'm sure there are. Maybe some parts have it different than others, but there are programs that are out there. And so maybe to just start to do a little bit of a scan, and sometimes working with like United Ways and even just local banks, you know, they might have some programs. So just start to maybe just check out in your community to see, but then and then the big area is just to kind of start to gauge the people you're working with, because, you know, many of them may know too, availability of things that are out there. And the more we can not duplicate what's already out there, the better, because Oscar said he's working on a really good evidence-based model and things, and there isn't really something directly that we know of so far for this population, though Yale is working on another project, and we can share the experience of collaborative support programs, which I'd be happy to do that. And some of our experiences is outlined in the manual that's up there from NIAPR, from the New York Association of Psych Rehab. You'll see some of our experiences in there, but you know, just look into your local community, because this does exist. So it's just sort of almost like going down the next street and seeing what's on the corner, and you'd be surprised. You'll find many more resources than you realized.
Yeah, I want to add, hang on, I just want to add one other place that people often don't look is the state's cooperative extension service. A lot of people think of that as related to agricultural programs, but they often do work around home economics, and they often have programs, particularly like around eating well in a budget, that might be useful resources. Oscar, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I agree with what's been said, and also just as a general theme that I would emphasize too that there are many free and safe financial counseling programs across the country. One of the disservices that I feel like we've made to people receiving mental health services is we've really isolated people, and we've isolated ourselves as a community by creating you know, mental health services that sometimes we don't even know what's out there in our communities, frankly. So really, if you're in the business of helping others in this area, really, we should really all take it our role to learn what's actually out there. And much of that is actually anti-poverty, asset-building communities. I agree with United Way. But I wanted to put a plug in for another resource that more recently, there's a new initiative across the country to tap into the resources that cities provide. A lot of cities, and now most of cities, have some form, in one way or another, a financial empowerment office. Here in New York City, for example, we have a pretty significant financial empowerment office that has free financial counseling. And there's a new initiative, national initiative, to basically train those counselors on how to best support people with disabilities, including people with psychiatric conditions. But those services are free and available to any citizen, and they're available across the country. So I would very much encourage you to look for financial empowerment centers in your city. If you're in a rural area, maybe a little bit harder to find those, but there may be actually representatives of those two that may be available, and that would be a good place to start. Reputable, free, and hopefully in time too, people that are developing expertise to work with people with psychiatric conditions.
Thank you so much for that, Oscar. And unfortunately, we are out of time. This is a very salient topic, and we have quite a few other questions sitting in queue that we won't be able to answer in this 1-hour webinar. So I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today. Again, the recording will be available on SAMHSA's YouTube channel, and you'll all get an email with a slide deck. Thank you to our presenters, Dr. Swarbrick, Oscar Jimenez-Solomon, and Dr. Pat Nemec. You guys had so much valuable information to share today. It was incredible. And again, I wish we could get to all of the questions that we have However, since we cannot, we do encourage anyone on the line to contact SAMHSA's Program to Achieve Wellness. Our email address is on the screen. It's paw@prainc.com. If there are questions that you have about financial wellness that were not answered today, please reach out to us and we'll do our best to help you. And we could also connect you with Oscar, Pat, and Peggy to get those questions answered. So thank you again to our panel. It was a very delightful webinar, and thank you to everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Crystal, and congratulations again to SAMHSA for the effort.
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is a great topic area, and we look forward to connecting with people around the country around this issue. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.